Well, my association with Raghu, how did it start now? He was 6 months ahead of me in the other course. So I looked up to him at that point. And thereafter, we got together in 1952 when both of us joined the Flying Instructors School. And that was the beginning of our everlasting friendship. And thereafter, both of us got posted to Jodhpur as very young raw instructors. But I don't know, he was way beyond his very age. So, having come from RIMC with his father's guidance and so on to how to move up in the Air Force as well. So he had a special aura about him. So I always looked up to him. And we were together all the time, and that is how our friendship thickened further. And in fact, we were so close, we were roommates there in Jodhpur. And all the other instructors, they used to call us the twins. The twins, and call us Heckle and Jekyll. These are the two magpies. But I think there is, I don't know which was the elder one. I think it was Heckle, I think. He was Heckle. Anyway, so that is that's how our friendship further firmed up at that point of time. And thereafter, in a matter of a year, he did something, I couldn't say naughty, but he tried to put the aeroplane through its paces. And he was flying so close to the ground that, that the station commander got a little concerned, very concerned. To that extent, he said that you should get out of this place and go to some other place. And he left me in a year's time. And the station commander was a rather grim gentleman. And it's amazing that years later, Raghavendran, when he was a squadron commander, met him, and the same guy who always used to look down upon him was eating out of his hands. That speaks volumes about this man. So I don't know what else to put across now. I think we, thereafter, in 1968, he went to Staff College. Can I carry on?
Yes.
He went to Staff College, and I was that time commanding Civil Station. He headed for Bareilly. And thereafter, we lost track of each other till it was 56. In 1956, I headed for Canberra one side, he went to the fighters, and we lost contact together for a number of years. Almost 11 years I was living a frog in the well in one place only, Agra, for 11 years. And this guy was moving from place to place and covered 43 places, can you imagine? 40 years of Air Force career, at 43 places you go to. How much stuff you have to get into your head and what you have been up to, you know. But wherever he was, he always excelled himself in any walk of life. In fact, for starting from a cadet to the instructors and various courses he went on, he always topped the merit list. And well, I lost track of him for a number of years, and I met up with him later on, and I went through his book on Kindle. When I read that book, Kindle, it was a revelation for me, because we had never talked about our family backgrounds and so on. And when I read that, it starts off in such humility that the very high class but austere Brahmin the community and coming from a very, well, sort of backward environments at that point. And for him to move up from there to where he landed up, and I think the credit, I don't know whether it's to him or to his father. Remarkable judgment, and the values which he had got into this guy, and I see the same now with his children now. This is all how it is. Where I have come now, I don't know. You see, in the Air Force, he was looked up to at all stages, from the time he joined till the time he left as the Vice Chief of Air Staff. And believe you me, I know about it, although I didn't meet him during that time, because I was only in one place. But he was very highly thought of, and he was always considered to be one of the exceptional planners, and a very, what should I say, a target-oriented achiever. And it was remarkable. And Raghu, I don't know where to, I'm getting a little emotional, so one thing I would say now, one more thing. I call it never personality. See, I had a friend of mine, a doctor. Doctor was giving a speech there, and there was one line which appealed to me a lot. And that line was that a knowledge of history and humanities makes a better physician. And I think that applies to all walks of life, and particularly to the Air Force. And you see, Raghu started off his Air Force because of the history, World War II, dedicated to flying Spitfires, and that is what charged him up. And his book is also a history, his life is a history. And I feel that this book should be compulsory reading for all the young officers of the Air Force. I would recommend that all the time.
Thank you very much. If any of you get a chance over lunch to talk to him, because last evening I did that. You take all this for granted, you don't bother with it, but yesterday I had to take some notes. With that, no further introductions. We go right into the panel. There's only one mic.
So, I had the privilege of reading the book in its draft form, and one of the first things that right straight away caught my eye was that Air Marshal Raghavendran sir has a flair for writing. He puts you right there in the cockpit seat. He writes about stories from Iran, from the different wars, from the different experiences. It's a wonderful book to read about. So, in this context, I would just like to go over a few questions with him and probably get further insight on it. One of the first things is, coming from a South Indian Tamil Brahmin family, one would have expected you'll go for ICS or civil services. Why did you pick the Air Force, and how did that come about?
I must say this is entirely the vision of my dad. He was in the teaching business. He was the only individual in total which is school among the staff or students. And we're talking about very late 30s, 40s. And he saw a circular, long before the DMK and everything else. We had a thing called the Justice Party, which later on became the DMK and all sort of thing. And the circular was a confidential one which said Brahmins have to be given only a very small quota, if at all. So he said, obviously there's not much future for the Brahmins in our traditional life in South India. And he envisioned we should be in central government services. And he came across this Gazette of India notification asking for applications. And he saw that the people who went to the school where I went, the Prince of Wales's Royal Indian Military College, which was really a school, all joined armed forces. And he took a decision that unlike most damn-rams, my son will go to the armed forces. And when at that point in time when they talked about armed forces, it was really army. And in our tradition it was called Patalam. And damn rat, but going to Patalam was not a good thing. But I tell you, his vision was great. So he sent me to that. He sent my elder brother 1 year later to Dufferin, the merchant marine, again out of the orbit of this anti-Brahmin thing. Two younger brothers also went into such similar thing. And that's how I got there. Once I got there, then the Air Force took my attention and I was totally, absorbed. Like I said in my book, I just lived to fly the Spitfire. Because that's what we saw in the news. In those days, when you went to a picture, they had to exhibit a news reel and it had to tell you all about how Britain was doing. We took music, whatever it was, and Battle of Britain, the whole thing. And all the time Spitfire. And I knew I could join, and in my school, people who were in training and things like that, they would clandestinely fly over the school. And they would bring Spitfires and things. So I said, that's it.
See, Air Marshal Raghavendran, you just said you joined the Air Force because you were fascinated by the idea of flying the Spitfire. So it's one thing to want to fly the Spitfire. It's one thing to actually get to be able to fly the Spitfire. What were the odds against you actually being able to do this, and what did it take for you to actually get into the cockpit of the Spitfire?
I really realized the odds only lately. Thousands of people applied to join the Air Force. And those days, there were very few slots available. We probably had about 10 squadrons. 10 squadrons multiplied by 20 pilots, only 200 pilots. So we didn't need all that many. So thousands applied, they selected absolutely the creme de la creme. In my batch who went to the selection board, so out of 1,000 they would select people to go to the selection board. In the selection board they picked. My batch of 20, I was only one. Then all your people, 1 in 20 went to a medical exam and some people dropped out. Then you went for training, and training was in 3 stages. The initial training, which was ground training, then there was basic flying and there was advanced flying. And when you finished advanced flying, you hadn't yet gone to fighters. But this showed that you could fly an aeroplane and you got your wings. That's what the occasion you get your commission and you get your wings. Now, we started 126 people at the initial training wing. We wound up with only 46. The remaining 80 odd people dropped out because some in fact played in the ground stage, but most of them in the flying stage. Out of the 46, only 20 went to fighters. So it was such a small percentage. But what was literally killing was the fighters. 20 people went to fighters. In the first 1 year after commissioning, 6 of my comrades died in Spitfires. And I would have been the 7th. I'll come to that later. But so the chances of going to the Air Force, getting your wings, flying, going on to fighters, and then flying the Spitfire and surviving it, I cannot imagine the odds. I tell you, I think it is written up here or karma or whatever, but it is unbelievable odds.
You have written about your precious with death. I know the ejection incident that happened and the motorcycle accident. One of the very interesting episodes of your life was finding yourself in Iraq and sort of getting into this aerobatics display of combat with an Iraqi pilot. And it's not a combat, it's like a competition with the Iraqi pilot where you took really extreme risks to fly lower than him, and what was going on? What made you take that kind of a risk at that point of time? Given your experiences and given all the training about flight safety, you really wanted to show him up, or is it that you didn't want India to be shown up in the Republic of Iraq?
Really, I firmly believe I was a cat in my last life. out of my 9 lives, I used up 2, I think, in that life. And I had my 7 in my bank balance. Because I can remember at least 7 occasions where I should have been kaput. The first, like I said, the Spitfire, while I was under training, coming into land, I hit a bird. And half the tail plane got smashed up. If I had been a higher speed, the entire tail plane would have gone and I would have spun it. So the Bhagwan saved. Then I was one of the many fighter pilots who had a motorcycle accident. And I had an accident where I was in a passed out stage by the roadside for about 3-4 hours. But luckily I had only a small fracture in the collarbone and a small fracture on my hand. I know a number of people of my vintage who died in motorcycle accidents. And then this one I had coming to land at Vampire, not coming back to base, very low level. I got a bird into my engine. The engine was in a mess. But it was having sufficient power to fly. I couldn't climb to bail out, and I dare not touch the throttle. If I changed the condition of the engine, it could pack up altogether. So I came along and somehow landed, and on landing, the engine stopped. I could not have bailed out because the aeroplane did not have ejection seats. And climbing out at say 300 feet where I was and jumping out, it was sure death anyway. So the only thing was to sit in the cockpit and hope like hell. And my God, you don't know how many forms of Bhagavan I prayed to.
All religions. All religions.
But mind you, those days I didn't know there was only one form. I believed there are a lot of forms. And then I had this accident in when in my Nath, the engine packed up at about 14,000 feet, and I was coming down, and then I decided, I have 2 other people in formation. We were going from Kanpur to Nagpur to Bombay. There was a huge display in Bombay that year, and I was flying the Nath aeroplane. We were supposed to be part of that. And so I was going down, and I decided I would have to eject. I will show you the blind that was you pull that handle, it is up here on above your head. Pull it, and literally the blind, it comes over your face. The reason is, if you go out at high speed, the velocity of the air would tear your eyes, nose and your mouth and everything. So this comes over your face. And from the time you pull this handle, first the canopy goes off, the seat fires, then you are pulled or pushed out of the seat automatically with the straps open, a small rope parachute opens, which pulls out the main parachute, and that opens. And the total time is 6 seconds. Wow. So then you come down, and I was, to cut it short, I was about to go and drown in a lake over there, but I managed to swing it aside. And then I carried on to Iraq. First, I had what Jagan mentioned. I was casually asked to, there was the 25th anniversary of the Iraqi Air Force. We were 3 Indian Air Force instructors there. One was transport, the other was the fighters. But the fellow came and asked me, he thought I was probably a display guy. And he said, will you do some low aerobatics? I said, what height do you want? Oh, 1,000 feet is all right. No, people in the Air Force do not practice aerobatic at 1,000 feet. It's against the law, against all the rules. We normally practice aerobatics, etc. about the fighters about 10,000 feet. But I was not going to say, look, I haven't practiced at 1,000 feet. Therefore, Indian prestige. Come on. I came on the airfield at 1,000 feet. I did my practice. I was very happy. Then this Iraqi guy takes off in a MiG-17. It's a much more powerful aircraft with what we call afterburner and all that. It goes like a zing. He does it 500 feet. I said, yeah, this is very bad. Ijjat ki baat hai. So I came down to 300 feet.
Oh my God.
And ultimately we were both doing it at 100 feet, just about the height of the trees. But that was not the really dicey part. I had to do something which you could not do. And I couldn't think of it. And also, I could not practice it because that glider will copy me or do something like that. So I thought of a maneuver where just after takeoff, at the end of the runway, I would pull up and do what we call a roll off the top. It goes like this. So you take off, you pull up like this, and you go over. It's called roll off the top. And the reason I had to roll off the top is because I would have preferred to do a loop. We go right round. But the Vampire aircraft, it went up less than what it would come down. So if I tried a loop, I'd make a small hole in the ground. So I said, I had to do this. In a loop, it was okay because from here, you're totally stalled. You had no control if you're at low speed. And it just flopped, and right here, your speed built up, you came. But here, you are at no speed. And you have to maneuver the aircraft to go around. You make a small mistake, you're in a spin. And fighter aircraft, when you're in a spin, they descend at about 20,000 feet per minute. Wow. So I had to take the chance. I had to do this for the prestige of the Indian Air Force. Bharat. So I did this, and normally we do this maneuver when we practice at 10,000 feet. At 320 knots. 320 knots is approximately, roughly say about 375 miles per hour. The speed I could get here at the end of the runway was 140 knots. So by the time I reach here, I have no knots. And I'm here. And so it worked out. After that, I did some other maneuvers which were also, I would say, different and classic. But this was something where I've been so close to death. I've never been closer. But you know, you get into the moment, you forget everything else. You have a wife, you have a family, you have a career and all that. I'm going to do this. I had one final one, a very exciting one, where while I was in Iraq, we had to ferry the training aeroplanes from Baghdad to Basra, and the technician didn't put enough gas, so my engine cut over the desert, absolutely. Miles and miles and miles of desert. There I was with my, it was a propeller aircraft, it was like a fan dead in front. And I didn't want to bail out, I had 5,000 feet, I didn't want to bail out because the same guy who didn't put gas in my engine may have packed my parachute. And I had to make the decision, I have to land. Do I land wheels down or wheels up? Because if you do wheels down, your wheels will get stuck in the sand. When you touch down, you go tumble and you are buried forever in the sand. If you have the wheels up, similar thing could happen. But luckily, my vision those days was a little better. I could make out some portions a little firmer. So I put the wheel down, landed. Again, I tell you, the forms of God I thought of, it all comes quickly. After I landed, they could see that we could land, so another training plane came, which had gone to Basra, came back with a jerry can full of gas and a funnel. To go up and land. So I counted that comes to 7 times. And I thought I have exhausted, I didn't do any more of this sort of thing.
Uncle, we're going to have to call you Top Gun.
That's actually one of my favorite stories in the book. I have this vision of you landing in the desert, and then this Bedouin comes out of the desert and offers you a cup of something to drink, and
Something like a parota.
yeah, that's right. And you sit with him in his tent, and it's an amazing picture. An Indian Air Force pilot in the Iraqi desert, sitting with this Bedouin, sipping a cup of tea, and then another plane shows up. You refill the aircraft with a jerry can and you take off. I think it's a fantastic story.
And so, did nothing to the technician who didn't put gas.
So, I guess these incidents remind us of one thing, that pilots live a dangerous life in the air, but the motorcycle accident reminds us that fighter pilots also live a dangerous life on the ground. There's this image of fighter pilots living a fast life on the ground, whether it's hard living, hard drinking, or getting the brawls or whatever it is. Why do you think pilots have this image, and do you think it was true of you and the men that you flew with?
Auntie's in the audience.
You know, the army, during the war and afterwards, used to call us the Bill Cream boys. We were being immaculately dressed, and all the girls would really go for the Air Force. Army guys would be sitting there with tongues hanging out, highly jealous and all this. And every fighter pilot thought that it could not happen to him, he's not going to die. But back of his mind, he thinks, it could happen. And the famous phrase, he lived as though there was no tomorrow. Back of his mind, that's exactly what you thought. Maybe there's no tomorrow. So let me have a gay time, when gay meant a good time. They spend the money, they beat it up, and launched off the next day, they had to come back unarmed. And so I don't know if I drank all that much, but we certainly lived a fast life, because it was maybe disappear the next day. And in the evenings when we did drink, we would have the bath songs going, thumping songs. And I don't think I will be able to sing any of them in this crowd. But I do remember one which may be alright. It used to go something like this. Oh, the eagles, they fly high in Mobile. Oh, the eagles, they fly high. This shit right in your eye. Thank the Lord, the cows don't fly in Mobile.
Having become a fighter pilot, you write that at one point you very almost became a bomber pilot. How did that come about? And if I can ask this question in retrospect, are you happy with the outcome, or do you think, would you have any regrets had you gone the bomber street?
This is, we were talking about 1957, and this is the time my twin brother Jaggi and I, we were both involved in this. I was in a squadron, number 20 squadron, where we were tasked with training transport pilots for being able to fly the brand new bombers we were getting, the Canberra bombers. And some fighters, fighter boys were also selected. And lo and behold, the first batch name comes out. My name is there, my friend's name is there. And I was absolutely adamant, I'm not going to this, whether it's Golden Bomber, Golden Canberra or not, I want to be a fighter. And there was a very prestigious course called a fighter combat course. It was done in England, and they used to select, literally you had to be the top person to go, which happened, vacancy came once a year or once in 2 years, and the competition was very, very stiff. So people of my seniority would all be jockeying for it, hoping the reports and things were good and we would go. So I said, I am going to somehow make it. And I joined the Air Force. I had two ambitions. One was to fly Spitfire, the other to be commanding a fighter squadron. After that, the career can go to hell. So I said, I'm not going to bombers. And he said, I'm also not going to bombers. So we both turned up at the senior officer's office and said, sir, we don't want to go to this. And he looked at us, his jaw dropped. You must be mad. And he said, do you know what you're saying? No, dude, this is the future. So, we look like some dummies you see in movies. No, sir. We want to go to the fighters' place, we want to stay. But he was persuaded subsequently to go to bombers. And I stayed on fighters, and I was lucky. I not only did the fighter combat course, commanded the squadron, and twice, every possible prestigious job in fighter team in higher up I got. And he went to bombers, and then he quit the Air Force, joined Air India. I think he made a lot of money in Air India, unlike the Air Force. And in the meantime, of course, along the way, he picked up only 2 Mahavir Chakras. And became a hero. So it's very difficult to say which is better. I think both had. And it sounds like a very good story for an Indian movie, like this, and going, both great friends, going different ways, doing well. And
And the pure that he flying all the fighters.
And I had one thing why I didn't send the script to the movies. The reason was they would want us to fall in love with the same girl, and then one of us would have to die. We don't want that.
Yeah. So, you've had two experiences in the 65 war as the commander of 23 Squadron, which became famous in the war because it produced so many saber killers or saber slayers, and then the 71 war as a station commander at Bareilly when the AM-12 bombers carried out the bombing operations up there. Could you tell us something about your wartime experiences, some of the good lessons, some of the bitter lessons that you learned in those 2 wars?
In 65 war, it was the day of the Nath. This is the Nath era. And I was the first Nath squadron commander, the first squadron of Nath that formed as commander. That was in 1960. I came back to the same squadron in 65. And it so happened, 3 people from my squadron pilots managed to engage sabers and shoot it down. Unfortunately, I didn't see any when I went up, so I didn't get my medal. And the Air Force made a name for itself with the Nath. And years later, when some people met the Pakistani pilots at that time, their briefing was, if you come across a Nath, you better get out quickly. But one very, very important thing we missed out, which was very sad. We were the first to cross the border in 65 by air, and we did not attack their airfields. The first, most important lesson in any war, you have taught in Staff College, destroy their air power before they attack you. We didn't do it. And they came back, and I tell you, it was, I was sitting in Pathankot when they attacked. And they kind of destroyed a number of our aircraft on the ground. And they did this in some other airfields. So, but one thing that was if I can be so strong as to say, it was a disgrace.
Was it a civilian thing or a command hierarchy?
No, that had to be an Air Force decision. Because at that point, it was left to the Air Force. But I have a feeling, I think this is what we surmised. Indian Air Force commander and the Pakistani Air Force commander, they had in fact been in the same squadron before partition. And I think the Indian Air Force commander is supposed to have thought, I won't hit your airfields and you be a nice guy, don't attack mine. But the Pakistani Air Force guy was a real professional. And the very funny thing was, he is also from a school. And in the school, he had a reputation as a killer boxer. So he was not going to be in Namibia and say, okay, you don't touch me, I won't touch you. He really clobbered us. So that was bad. And also the army complained that we did not give enough support, which is not true, but it's just that they didn't ask enough and we didn't give enough. But 71, it was the classic war where Air Force did everything right. We were in position, and the reason for this was we had a better man as Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi. She gave us adequate warning. She envisioned in about a year we are going to war. You be ready. We were in position, ammunition, squadrons were in their advanced bases. And of course we kind of, you can say, ambushed them. Because we were helping the Mufti Bahinis and they had to do something, they had to technically attack first. And we clobbered them in there on the ground. So that is how the war should have been fought in 65. But I think Pakistan learned the lesson in 71 and that's why we haven't had a war since then. And I think the Air Force also has been a lot more professional and we are very happy with what it is.
But what could have been done better for the Chinese war? Why was the Chinese war being, completely a different?
Because the Air Force was prevented from going to war, and the person who took pictures of the Chinese troops in the open from a level of 300 feet, all in the open, was my friend Jagina. And for that he got a Mahavi Chakra because he was out over them at really low level, exposing himself. And we had the pictures, and we had the capability to destroy them. And same thing in the East. It was a political decision that the Air Force would not be used because, I can say this thought, Jawaharlal Nehru people thought, if we do this, if the Chinese will come and bomb Delhi, फिर क्या होगा? And this is ridiculous. They had no fighters come. They had about 3 or 4 bombers which had to come from mainland China. They would have carried probably two bombs each or 3 bombs each. And we had fighters on the ground, night fighters. We had anti-aircraft on readiness. But I don't think they had the understanding or the guts. They didn't have the experience. It was so strange that when we got independence, Nehru insisted that the Army Chief, Navy Chief and the Air Force Chief all had to be British for a few more years. Krishna Nair came and met me, they wrote a beautiful article about me and I felt this guy is a good guy, he could write some book. But anyway, I wrote some essays and I'm really thankful to Samir, Jagan and Nair for putting it into Bharat Rakshak, which eventually later on when Rangan said, why did you write a book? I used most of it and I added some articles and that's how the book came about. And I'm so happy and so proud that Samir and Jagan could be here today. It's a real pleasure to me.